Hey everyone, before we get into this next episode, I want to give a quick shout out to a couple of the supporters of the podcast, being Seth Roy from North Mountain Goshawks. And for those of you who are in the market for a new hunting partner for next season, particularly a parent-reared North American Finnish or Russian goshawk, you're running out of time to get on that list. Pretty soon we'll have lots of young birds, and you'll be without one if you don't get on northmountaingoshawks.com, fill out the information there, or hit them up on Facebook at North Mountain Goshawks, or send them an email at ostringer3@gmail.com. Get on that list, get your new hunting partner secured for next season, and prepared to have a lot of fun. I also want to give a quick shout out to onX, and for those of you that aren't currently using the onX app to enhance your overall hunting experience, you are missing out. It's an app that I rely on quite a bit, not just to keep track of my own hunting spots, but to also scout ahead for some new ones. And if there's private land that I don't have access to, it's a good way to find the landowner's information to try and get permission. And the app is also useful in a lot of other ways as well. So if you are not a current subscriber and want to subscribe, just head to onxmaps.com, enter the promo code HXP20, and start knowing where you stand with onX. And now, on to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
I immediately called her down because she was really well trained, and she just sat there. I put the lure down, she sat there, and so while I'm kind of fiddling around, the sun was almost getting ready to set. One of the combines pulls up, and this old farmer gets out, and immediately, when you think you're trespassing something, I was fast talking, I'm doing this, I'm waiting, get my bird leaving as soon as as soon as I called her down, and he walks up to me and just says, "Is that your bird?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "That bird chased a rabbit in front of my combine. I ran it over and it shot out the top."
Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and my guest for this episode is Bob Glass, who is also the author of the newly released book, A Journey with Red Tails. And this was a fun episode to record with Bob because we have some mutual friends in falconry, and we're also musicians too, so it was kind of fun to talk shop about some of that stuff, which you'll hear a little bit in this episode. But I think you'll enjoy some of the cool stories he had to share, a couple of which are in his book, and I hope you enjoy hearing us kind of banter back and forth about all kinds of stuff in this episode. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to this conversation that I had at the New Jersey Falconry Meet earlier this year with Bob Glass. Here we go. No, this will be nice though, because it's not very often that I get to do any of these with falconers who are also musicians and already kind of used to studio etiquette in a way and all that kind of stuff. So this is cool.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate it to be here.
Yeah, no, well, and go ahead and just let's keep on the train of thought that we were just talking about. We're talking about returns on investment and everything, and like you just recently, of course, released your book, and as far as that end of things go, I mean, I've as you know, I've had multiple falconers on the podcast who have written books and have talked a little bit about the time, effort, energy, return on investment, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you, of course, have just released one and are dealing with kind of the modern issues with pricing, turnaround, everything, putting it all together. I mean, what's everything been like with your experience with that so far then?
Yeah, it's you got to go into it knowing that you're not doing it yourself, you can write all the text in yourself, and you can contribute as much as you can to the the quality of what goes in the book, but a sport like falconry is super complex, and I don't know everything. So I knew I wanted to call in some people who, I consider some of the best of what they do, in the sport. And I seeked them out, and I had contributing authors. I had Robert Huber, the master hood maker from Oklahoma, talked to him, never met him. And that was kind of a cool thing getting involved in the book too, because I met and talked to people I never never talked to before. And so Robert, was really gracious, wrote a really nice chapter on hooding, hood making. He says he always encourages people to make their first hoods just to understand what's going on with it. And then he talks about fitting and all that. So that chapter is really good. And then, the diamond in the book is Teddy Moritz decided to contribute a whole chapter on dachshunds and hunting. And she wrote a really great story of the first red tail she ever had. So that I was really excited because Teddy, I've known her my whole, 40 years of flying falcons, and I didn't want her, hawks in general. And if I was going to have anyone write anything about dogs, and dogs are an intricate part of, at least East Coast falconry, the small dogs, we're not out west where we're running big setters, but, the dachshund's the mainstay, and she's the person to go to. So, I was overjoyed that she decided to contribute, and it's really a nice project she helped out with. And then my apprentice Brittany, who actually was kind of a spearhead in getting the book written, she was apprentice at my apprentice at the time 3 years ago, and she wrote an article about her apprentice bird that got severely injured, and most falconers would have just been like, you know what, I have nothing I can't do, but she, do about it. But it was a real serious eye injury, and she just was perseverance, and she just like, I'm not letting it go. So she nursed that bird all the way back to health. They actually sewed the bird's eyes shut for a full month, and the next year the bird was a really great hunter, and she just did a wonderful job, and that was a real good story for there. So those are the contributing authors. And then the photography is the other thing. I wasn't going to write a book that I've been doing it for 40 years, so I wasn't going to write a book I didn't want to read or I wouldn't pick up and be interested in. So, I just went out on the internet and I found like the best photographers in the world, and every single one of them, I just sent them a simple email saying, I'm working on this project on red-tailed hawks, and, would you mind contributing, and I would love to include your stuff. And every single person I spoke to said yes. So that was a pretty exciting thing. And then doing research, I had to go back and, I knew all my stories and I knew all the stuff I wanted to put in the book. But then I wanted to research stuff from back in the olden days, and I collect a lot of old bird books. And so all that stuff's in there. Now, as far as the business end of it, it's not. It is expensive, and especially if you want to make a picture coffee table book, which I kind of envisioned the book to be, especially with all the photographs. You want the displays to look, really nice. So we did invest a lot of money, me and my wife, in it, and then, but I just tried to build a business model around it. I knew the community. I knew that there's people out there who are going to buy it, and it's. The goal is never to make money, as far as I'm concerned. I want to just break even, and we're only a month and a half into it. We're real close to breaking even. It's been selling really well. Supply houses have been buying it. So that whole part's been a really good experience. And then I'm meeting people who I really don't, meet all the time. I'm doing a lot of guest speaking. So that's exciting. I just was in North Carolina guest speaking there. And so that part of it was the tedious part of it, marketing it and all that, but it's all enjoyable.
Yeah, no, as far as just the different stuff that goes into any kind of artistic endeavor or putting out anything extraneous at all, I mean, it really is amazing how much extra elbow grease just goes into just prepping everything, and all the time it takes. Just, I mean, I as I mentioned to you before we got together and officially met, I mean, I did get a chance to read your book, and I mean, just all the different people that contributed those photos, the authors that contributed, like you said, Teddy. I mean, the other people that wrote those chapters. I mean, just the time alone and simple correspondence, it just takes so much. I know, of course, I mean, we'll talk about this here in a little bit too, but I mean, we're both musicians. We both do artistic things outside of these other endeavors that we do. So I totally sympathize, because a lot of people, don't understand all of the other little subtle intricacies that go into the prep work, that it takes to create something that on the surface, yeah, it's just a book, but there's so much more to it than just a simple book,
Yeah, it was, it's kind of funny looking back because I was, that I even wrote a book because I was never a good student. My spelling to this day is atrocious. And, but I just started, how to eat an elephant. You just start, one bite at a time. So I just started writing small parts that I envisioned would be like articles, maybe in some publication. And then it kind of went from there. Because I just got done with an apprentice, kind of all the apprentice stuff was still fresh in my mind. Training birds and instructing, my apprentice on how I consider people should train them and handle them and hunt with them, And I make a point of saying in my book that all three of my apprentices turned out to be outstanding game hawkers, and that I'm the most proud of anything. But it also kind of started about 3 years ago because someone asked me how many red tails I'd flown, and I really didn't know. So I literally sat down with a piece of paper and wrote, the year I became an apprentice, all the way through last year. So when I was writing a book, I was flying my 22nd red tail. And I only interviewed 3 of those birds, for one season, and then the rest were all just passage birds. And the reason why I kind of do that is we have access. We have a really great ridge trapping spot. So as far as access to passage red tails, it's we have a prime spot. So that's never a problem acquiring birds. And then me and my wife like to travel a lot. So when I can fly a bird for a season and release it in the spring, and then we travel all summer long, and then I really like the training part of it. I never thought it was that interesting taking a bird out of the mew at the end of the summer and flying them on the Creon's Troys and getting them out again. It's just, I'm like, where's the training? They already know. But it's fun. On seasons, you want to get a running start on to have a bird. And I did that last year. I molded out a bird last year, but it was the first one I had done in 20 some years.
Yeah, I really haven't, to be 100% honest, I really haven't interviewed very many birds. And part of it plays into just circumstances, having had, probably actually more or just as many captive bred birds that have had, and either things haven't worked out, some get transferred, some get whatever. I've also had a couple of passage birds as well, but I didn't end up interviewing them. I ended up going ahead and just turning them loose. One actually turned herself loose, that kind of thing too. So yeah, I mean, the thing is I'm kind of, just by reading your book and stuff, I kind of got the idea that you're kind of a similar mindset, and that, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for someone to keep interviewing like the same bird over and over and over again, because they're technically not learning a whole lot that way.
Right.
And for me, I like the learning experiences also. And so I kind of felt that aspect of the book was your writing and just kind of like your overall mentality was relatable in that way.
Yeah. Over the years, and I've been a NAFA member for 40 years, so I read about all the guys, and it was kind of funny, guys you hear year after year old, and they're all old. I consider them all old timers older than me. But you always know these guys, those guys are red tail guys. They're red tail guys. And funny enough, I talk to them and they're like, well, I've only flown 2 or 4 of them, but I've kept one for 25 years, And there's nothing against that, but I feel the other way. I really feel truly in my heart that I'm borrowing the bird from the wild. So I want to get them through that first winter, hard winter. They, return them back to the wild as like real successful hunters. So in my mindset, there's never an idea of keeping a bird, because my goal is just to get through that season, get them really, hunting well, and then releasing them, and I feel real good about that. So that's the way I look at passage red tails. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, and there's, I'm sure you've heard kind of the overall mentality or mindset with a lot of people in the falconry community too. You've been doing this for a long time, so I know you've heard plenty of things, as far as just opinions and mindsets and things as well.
You may not know it, but falconers are very opinionated. I just thought I'd let you know that.
Yeah. I've mentioned it many times, many times. People are probably sick of hearing it now. They falconers and their opinions, It's but as far as that goes, I mean, there's a lot of people that like our rules and regs are good for what they are, and in a lot of different ways, especially with the sponsor and apprentice aspect of things. And but there are some things that probably could be fine-tuned in a lot of people's eyes, and one of those things would be, like there's a lot of people that think, for example, that you shouldn't necessarily be able to upgrade to, like, say, master level, for example, if all you've flown is, like, say, the same red tail for like 11 years or something.
Right,
you know what I mean? So, I mean, what are your thoughts kind of on that?
I think it's a natural progression. When I started out, I flew my red tail and I loved it, and I intermewed it, and that was my bird for 2 years. And we had a real bond. It was a fantastic bird. But in my mind, I wanted, all my other friends are flying falcons, all my other friends are flying Harris Hawks, and I knew at my start that's how I wanted to progress. So I flew the bird for 2 years. I got a Harris Hawk, flew that for 2 years, and then my sponsor was heavily into falcons, and just a wonderful Bon Lazaga, wonderful falcon flyer, and so I just kind of naturally followed behind him and started flying falcons. So I flew them for about 10 years. I had a really wonderful Jura Prairie I flew for 7 years, and then it kind of fell back that. When I was done with the falcons, I kind of just rolled back into red tails because I was comfortable with them. And deep down in my heart, I'm a rabbit hunter. That's it. I hunt rabbits. So if I was a gun hunter, I guess I'd have beagles and have guns and shoot rabbits. But I'm really a rabbit hunter. So anything that catches rabbits. So I flew red tails for a bunch of more years, and then I got a really fortunate. I had an imprint. Female North American goshawk. That was just a fantastic bird, and I flew that for 8 seasons. And talk about overkill for rabbits, because I really don't have ducks on creeks by me, and I wasn't too interested in flying squirrels because I live in Cottontail Central, and that was an eye opener too, because they just can catch anything they want. They're really interesting birds, and my biggest observation about goshawks, and mine in particular, is I would take that bird out and fly it, and it would catch stuff. It may not catch stuff, but if I broke that bird out 45 minutes before sunset, it would catch anything that moved. And it was just their mindsets are so different than any other bird. And I always tell the adage that my wife was so used to me flying red tails, I'd get home and she'd go, I can tell on the look on your face you didn't catch anything. And I said, no, we caught 3 rabbits. Just my longest flight was 10 feet, because I only flew off the fist. And it was kind of funny just how efficient, goshawks were. And I really fell in love with that bird, and I really enjoyed it. But that's like shooting a rabbit with a bazooka, when you when you only need a BB gun, And and then I came back to red tails, and just it was just season after season. I started looking, and it was just, And one thing I point out in the book, first and foremost, they're all different. People think, oh, it's a red tail, it's this thing. And even my apprentice now my former apprentice, Brittany, she's had 3 red tails. And her first reaction to every single one of them is, wow, they're completely different. It's nothing like my bird last year. And that's true, Some are good hunters, some aren't so good hunters. And some are just, buy into the program, sooner and better than other ones, And the funny thing is I stay very consistent with my training. So in my mind, I know where the bar's set. I know, what past birds have done, the way I trained them in the past, and the future birds. So I find that part of it really interesting, because they really are different. Everyone's got a different personality, and some are, aggressive towards you, nasty towards you. Some just love you, and are very calm. So that was the most interesting thing when I look back at the birds, and I don't name my birds when I fly them. I don't, name them Thor or anything like that. But when I let them go, I put a name in my journal about them. So I know I talk about that, So I had a bird named Spaz because every time I'd open the kennel, he'd jump straight up and hit his head. I go, this bird's a real Spaz. But, besides that, so I name, when I release them, I name them after what I think their personalities were. And so then when I started reading back in my journal, I was like, oh, yeah, that bird used to do this and that bird. So I did a few case studies in the book of, there's a little bit of something in the book. So I did a few case studies of birds that were really unusual behavior. One bird was fistbound from day one. One bird was just scared to death of anything in the world, since I had it. And, I say up front too, I certainly didn't solve all their problems, but I found ways to work with them and train them to become real successful hunting birds, And, coming back to, falconers and opinions and stuff, you're kind of always looking over your shoulder, especially when you're writing a book. But, I had to make a disclaimer. I said, that I've never flown a bird that didn't catch game, a red tail. I never had one die, and I never had one receive a debilitating injury. I've had some get injured, but, they all were fine by the time I released them. So, I kind of stated that just so people kind of know where I stood there. If I had 20 red tails and killed 5 of them, I don't think I'd want to read that person's book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's still got to be like caveats to that too, though. I mean, like the odds of people being able to fly on average 20 red tails without at least a couple of them dying from some circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, stuff happens, right?
It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're flying them like they should be flown, stuff happens. Transformers, cars. I mean, everybody knows what the pitfalls are that are involved in falconry. I mean, there's 1,000,001 ways for these birds to die. And, if you're really hunting them a lot like you're supposed to be, I mean, it is very, 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 very difficult for something bad not to happen to at least like 1 out of 20 birds.
Yeah, I made a point of putting things in the book that no one else have ever covered. I wrote a whole chapter about flying at field meets, which is a difficult thing to do unto itself. But I also wrote the chapter about avoiding disaster. Mm-hmm. And, it's just, over the years, I heard of just about every way, a falconry bird can be injured or killed. And I just made a point of writing that section up, but just saying, hey, avoid hunting next to busy roads. Look out for transformers and stuff. Building windows is a huge thing. And I had caught myself a lot of times flying industrial parks, and my bird would catch something. I'd look up and there's a gigantic building next to us with these panes of glass that were, surely could have flown in. So, that stuff you all learn. Fortunately, I didn't learn it personally, but I wanted to point it out to everyone in the book. So there's a whole chapter, for young people, just like, maybe I shouldn't be hunting next to this highway. Maybe it isn't a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully that's another thing too, that people are learning, from their sponsors and other, positive influences as well, whenever they're starting off. I mean, when you don't know, you don't know. And it's good that at least you had that kind of forethought to at least want to put something like that in there, because I mean, and I also understand that not everybody's, sponsorships and not everybody's situations where they're learning are created necessarily equal also. I mean, we all have different, challenges and circumstances that we have to face whenever we're being introduced to all these things and learning them. So, I mean, it's good that you at least thought to put that in there.
Yeah. I wanted it for a little bit of everything. I want a new falconer or someone who's involved in the sport can actually see what it entails. I want an experienced falconer to pick the book up, and besides enjoying the pictures, some of the stories, then there's just a few stories of just crazy stuff that happened, and some of them I bring up in when I'm guest speaking and all, but so I felt I had a lot of material, and it was just a matter of outlining it, writing it down, and then of course I wanted to include all the training, all the equipment. So it's pretty, pretty basic stuff. Most people, if you're an experienced falconer, you would skip over. One thing I wanted to mention, though, that I drop a lot of names in the book, and they're for a reason too, because I want people to hear these people's names who were true pioneers in the sport, who made equipment and stuff like that. So I mentioned Pete Asborno, who was like the original guy who made bells, and they were the really good bells. And you had to call him up and order your bells from him, and then 6 months later you'd call him up and ask him where your bells were, and he said, "Oh, I'm making them." And then you place another order because your bells weren't coming in 6 months. So you always had a constant order. But Pete Asborno, wonderful guy. I mean, Doug Pino, one of the true gentlemen of the sport, and I got to know Doug pretty well because when I was a secretary of NAFA, I was going to a lot of NAFA meets back in the 90s. And he made a point of every time he saw me, shake my hand, remembered my name. His vests, his bags, and his swivels are just the best you can buy. And I'm kind of glad Rose Falconry is selling that stuff.
He made good hoods too.
Yeah, and yeah. Actually, I do have one of his hoods too. And then, I have to mention Louis Luxander, the father of telemetry, and he was always a really nice guy and made transmitters. And to be honest with you, I have my old original setup, and I actually used it for the first few weeks of this season. My wildlife material receiver that was $350, and I was still using an old Louis Luxander LF3 transmitter from tail mount from my old long wing days. I would probably say I probably soldered 35 antennas on that thing in the course of its life. But I like that stuff and all that and remember it. And I mentioned Bill Snell, who made early swivels. So I want people to hear those people's names and realize they were the people who we all went to when we started out and looked up to and got their equipment, and their equipment was as fine as anything that's made now. Let's face it, Dave Noble's stepped up to a new level with bells. His bells are absolutely beautiful and sound great. But so I mentioned a lot of names in the book I want people to hear their names and maybe look them up.
Sure. Well, and like you said, I mean, if you're writing a book and you're kind of wanting that to achieve that goal that it seems like you set out to kind of achieve you're not, like you said, it's not things like that aren't really an endeavor where you're going to make millions of dollars and stuff. Yeah. But it's not only kind of like that you want to share knowledge that you've collected over the years, but in a way, I mean, you seem like the kind of person, just in the very short amount of time that I've met you here, that you're very much considerate and want to give back to those that gave to you as well. And not just put something out there that's going to be something like, well, everybody should listen to me about these kind of things, but you kind of want to pay tribute to the people that mattered to you. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I never want to be another internet falconry expert, be online giving my worthless advice when it's not asked for. But if people ask me, I'll tell them. And that's something too with a lot of the old falconers. I grew up starting out, and there were guys like Roy Frock from Pennsylvania and Joe Harmer and Bill McBride. Those guys were all the original guys. Roy Frock, his sponsor was Corny McFadden, the father of American falconry. So it's kind of, I paid attention to what they were and their standards. And Roy in particular, he would not hesitate to tell you something good or something bad, of what you're doing. And I always took that, I always appreciated that one way or another. And the first time I ever met him, I was an apprentice, and I had a really, really good apprentice for Nick. And it was the first meet I went to, and my bird caught a rabbit, and I didn't have my food ready. So I grabbed my poultry shears and I cut the back leg off my rabbit while my Red Tail's holding on to its head, and Roy just real politely said, "Well, how many toes have you cut off doing that?" And right then I'm like, "Oh, I'm an idiot, aren't I? I should never." And so it was like a learning experience for me. I'll never do that again. I promised myself. And so he was such a really good mentor, and he was such a good guy. So those guys too, I have a little picture of them in the back of the book because I looked up to those guys. And, they were all the original guys down on Aztec Island, catching peregrines and bringing them back on the train to Philly, So you got to, give them props, those guys.
Sure. Well, and I guess now would be kind of a good time to go ahead and just talk about, some of the music stuff and everything too. And of course, we have to mention once again our mutual friend, Mr. Bon Lazaga, and say, hey, Bon. He actually called me earlier too while I was out in the field. I was in the middle watching trying to keep track of my dachshunds, kicking up rabbits and stuff earlier, and I was joking with him because I knew the answer was no, but I asked him, I was like, so you on your way, and he's just like, no, I'm not. Yeah, I said, whatever, man.
Get him to move around. I did see him last week at the North Carolina meet. He came down, and and he's a great guy. I was a bird watcher for many, many years, and when I was driving down the road, I was actually driving to work. Driving for work. I was driving a pickup truck, and I saw a hare's hawk on the side of the road. And I thought, crap, I'm seeing the greatest bird sighting in New Jersey. And I pulled around, and here he calls it down to his fist, and it was him. And he was a real nice guy. I said, look, I gotta, I just never thought I'd ever see anyone who did this, It's the early 80s. And I said, I gotta go out with you. And that's what it was. And then as it turned out, he moved 10 minutes from my house. Just after that, I met him. He sponsored me, and we just been hawking ever since. So now he's a master passage peregrine flyer, catching snipe, and so I try once a year to get down to his place, and we'll hunt down there. And but yeah, he's a great guy, and he's a great musician. He opened up his trunk one day and said, had guitars in it, and I said, "Oh, you play guitar? We play guitar. Why don't you come and play my band?" And we just had a basement band, right? A garage band. We played parties. And he came down, and we were like, oh, my God, we didn't realize the guy was a world-class musician, toured over the world, spent, years touring in Europe and everywhere. And so it was so funny. And he didn't care because he's the kind of musician that he just likes playing anything.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a master jazz fusion player, and that's really a genre, but he can play anything, and he enjoys it all too. So I always thought that was great, about him.
Yeah, he's a good dude for sure. And did he tell you, kind of how we know each other and everything and all that, or did he mention some of that?
Originally, he said you knew Ryan Martini from Mudvayne, and then you guys kind of hooked up from there. And then, but I honestly didn't know when I saw your profile picture and you had the Warwick basses. I was like, this guy at least knows what he's doing. He's got these nice Warwick basses.
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you real quick. So. Ironically enough, Bon and Ryan are the reasons I discovered falconry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so ironically enough, so I was doing some mixing for them, and whenever Bon was doing one of his solo records before they officially formed, Soften the Glare and stuff,
right.
Him and Ryan and Mitch, he was doing some, and a couple of the songs that were on that solo record, he had me mix and edit and stuff for him and Ryan. And so I was going over one of those edits with them one day. It was with Ryan, and I remember Ryan just mentioning kind of in passing, like, he was just like, I'm going to go hunting with Bon, this weekend. He's going to have his peregrine. We're going to try and hunt some ducks, whatever, this, that, and the other. And I was like, cool, whatever. And, and finished the discussion about the edits and whatever. And I was like, see you later, whatever. And I remember about 15 minutes later, I was just thinking randomly, and he's just like, he's talking about peregrine? What the hell, And so the next time I talked to him to go over the next set of edits and stuff, I asked him about it. And, I had already kind of struck some degree of a rapport with Bon by this point, personally. Mm-hmm. And so, he was just like, yeah, I'll say something to him or whatever. And so Bon was just like, yeah, man, so what do you want to know? How Bon is,
Bon will not tell you anything, but if you ask him a question, he will give you the answer. I tell people, because they always say, well, your friend does this. I said, yes, well, you need to go and ask him specifically, and he will tell you, the proper answer, but yeah, he's not forthcoming. He'll so you want to know an answer, you ask him the question. But I like people like that. You
Sure.
know?
Well, and the great thing about Bond too is he's always pretty short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, I asked him a handful of questions, and then from there I contacted the Indiana DNR, because I live in Indiana, and got the falconry packet, and then basically found guys in my area to do, and that's how I discovered falconry. So I owe my discovery and entry into all of this to them. I give them credit for that. So anyway, just a funny backstory of how small the world is. Just really another example for people.
And especially the falconry community is very small. So when you finally get involved in it,
for sure. So real quick, I mean, people can just bear with this for a minute because I have to know. What's been your favorite overall brand and model of basses to play over the years?
Well, I play more guitar than basses.
Yeah, well,
so my first bass I got was from a pawn shop, and something I'll point out to musicians right now, that back in the 70s you could go in a pawn shop and you could find beautiful vintage guitars and for a dirt cheap price, because nobody really had anything. There's no internet. So I bought a 73 Telecaster bass for like $160. And it has a beautiful bottom end. I love playing it. I still play it to this day. I got worried when I played with Bond, I played bass mostly, in our little party band. And I was worried that the Telecaster was so old. So I bought a Schecter bass, just a Schecter bass, a more modern bass. And so that one I play. But the Tele bass, it just has the bottom end, and I enjoy that more. And I know you play, have basses with all those extra strings on them, but I can barely manage the four. But as far as guitars go, I have a bunch of vintage guitars, and it's kind of funny talking about guitars because we just had a high school reunion a while ago, and a bunch of my friends are just professional musicians now. And I always ask them, my one friend, I said, where's your, 72, triple humbucker Black Beauty, Les Paul? Oh, I pawned that one. I went back to my other friend, where's your 74 Les Paul? Well, where's it, and they're like, oh, I sold that. I never sold a piece of equipment ever in my life. So my wife's constantly saying, how many guitars you need? No one can have enough. So I have a really nice collection. I have some vintage, some new stuff. The new stuff I've been buying a couple Gretsches lately. I bought a Gretsch Resonator because I like to play. I've been playing a lot of slide on our songs. So I bought a Gretsch Resonator, a steel guitar. And I bought a really cool hollow body Electromatic Gretsch, which I like. That's why I've been playing it lately. And just a vanity buy. When I was growing up, we'd go to the guitar stores and no one could afford a Gibson Firebird or anything like that. So in the back of my mind, I always wanted a Firebird. So I bought one of those about 7-8 years ago. And I play that a lot on some stuff. But I try to buy a new guitar every year. And I still have my original Music Man amp, 65-watt amp that I bought in 78. Eric Clapton came out with those. They're made by Leo Fender. So, of course, if Eric Clapton's playing them, everyone's going to jump on the bandwagon. So I have that. And then recently I just bought a really cool Fender Blues Deluxe amp that has like a dirty channel. And so that one I've been playing a lot too. Acoustics, I have some Martins. And I have a really cool... I have a bunch of pawn shop stuff that I bought in the 70s and 80s. So I have a 1954 Harmony hollow body guitar that has a pickup in it. It's an H60 or something like that. But I was counting up the other day, that guitar's like 70 years old. So it's fun to collect them. Whoever dies with the most guitars, is the one who wins. I
always used to joke that whenever I died, I was going to basically put in my overall like death request, I guess, was that I was going to be cremated and then somehow basically drilled and inserted it into the neck of my one of my basses or something.
Right,
and then,
maybe it could be the fret markers.
Yeah.
on one. You could have someone. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I've joked with people with that before, and at times was probably less than half serious, you know.
Now you get more, the older you get, the more and more serious you get.
Yeah.
But I try to tell my wife, you know, if you buy good quality guitars, they don't devaluate in price. You know, so I always tell her, like, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you know, you could sell these for a little bit of money. It wasn't, you know, money wasted. But I like, you know, and I have some Fenders, you know, and stuff like that. So I like a little bit of everything. And you know, you get certain sounds on certain songs. And now that I've been playing a lot more slide and stuff, I bought a lap steel, which is fun. And it kind of ruined me because I just like playing slide on the lap steel now because I can realize I could just sit down, relax, and I can hit all the notes easy. So that's the kind of stuff I've been playing.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I don't get to play near as much as I used to anymore. I just with the podcast and with all the other things that I have going on outside of just normal life responsibilities.
And nailing down your bandmates to rehearse and find time to go out is a real challenge. So the stars have to align. Mm-hmm. And I admire guys like Bon and Ryan and the stuff they've achieved with, you know, sticking with these bands and just hammering it out. And, you know, they've made comments to me, you know, people tell me all the time I'm living my dream, but, you know, this is work. We're driving, you know, hours to gigs where, you know, it's not a super glamorous life. It's a glamorous life for an hour and a half when you're on the stage.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're not the only, you know, prominent like musician friends that I've got plenty of other friends too that have been able to successfully make a really good living and you know, or they're in fairly well-known bands and things. And it's, you discover real fast that it's not what you think it is, but at the same time, you know, I mean, that's still, you know, for those of us that hoped or aspired to be able to do that for a living and then end up doing something else, it's kind of like, well, there's always the what if factor, but at the same time, you know, I mean, knowing what I know now and seeing where things have kind of progressed over time and how the industry has evolved, whatever, you know.
Well, I enjoy it so much. I never want to ever experience playing being a burden or not having fun playing. So at the level I'm playing now, just, you know, little gigs out and here and there, I really enjoy it and I enjoy each one, you know, because you never want to consider it work or anything like that. So I would never want to get to that point. And then, you know, Falconers were, you know, musicians are one thing. That's our nighttime work, but we got a full day's work as Falconers. It's like that's our day job, you know.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, it's hard enough fitting falconry in, and you know, to some people that might sound weird, but like, you know, you find, and this has been mentioned before too, but you find yourself over the years starting to fit everything else in around falconry.
Well, everything else is, as far as I'm concerned, is a hobby, and it didn't make the book. But I had my old dirt bike. I used to race dirt bikes. I had pictures of dirt bikes. You know, skiing. You know, in Vermont. I had, you know, fishing and shooting. I shot competition skeet for years and years. So I had pictures of all that, and I was going to put a page that said, these are hobbies. This is what we live for. And then the next page was going to be, you know, all our hunting stuff. And it's funny, you know, a common, and I'm sure you get asked this question all the time. I like when people ask, well, you know, how often do you take the bird out? And so my patent reply is, well, I try to get out 4 days. I'm retired, so I try to get out 4 days a week. If I wanted to be divorced, I would get out 7 days a week, you know. And I always keep one bird, but you know, if I wanted to be divorced, I could have 5 birds, you know. So you know, that's a work-life balance too. And my wife loves falconry, and I mentioned in the book, on our first date, I took her out hunting with my red tail. And so she's always enjoyed it. She's a veteran of many field meet, especially when I was a NAFA secretary. You know, we'd go out west, and she would go out hunting, or she would sit back in the hotel room and kick back. And she pointed out the other day, because in my guest speaking slideshow, I was just at the NAFA meet in Nebraska.
Yeah. As was I for a couple of days too.
And over here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And So I called a rabbit, and when I was showing the picture of it, she raises her hand and then pointed herself. I said, "Oh, my wife flushed this rabbit, so she's taking, she's taking a, responsibility for me catching that rabbit." But yeah, let's talk. Can we talk about the meet for a little bit? Because
sure. I wish I could have gone more than just a couple days. That's all I could really get off work for and be available for. But I was doing a lot of recordings during the 2 days that I was there, and it was the very beginning of the week. But so yeah, talk about your experience, and then also kind of fill me in on what I missed during the rest of the week too. Because
back in the day, in the 90s, Ken Felix was the president of NAFA, like just after Jim Weaver and some other people, and he talked me into becoming the secretary. So, I would approach my wife and say, well, if I'm secretary of NAFA, I'm going to have to go to those meets. It's going to like acting like it's a burden, So for about 5 years, we went to, we got to see, Vernal, Utah and Cedar City, Utah and Lamar, Colorado and Amarillo and got to do all that stuff. So I hadn't been to a NAFA meet in 20 years. And when the book was coming out, it was supposed to be ready before the meet, and we were going to have a vendor table and, promote it then. It just didn't make it. It was a little, slow process. But so I still went out. I drove out with my dachshund, and my wife, the only smart person, flew out. But it was a great meet. And something I talk about in the meet section is, you have to be ready for anything when you go to a meet. And my number one advice to anyone going to a field meet is any piece of falconry equipment you have, and it can fit in your car, you take it with you because you never know when you're going to lose, break, or need something. So I always tell people my number one advice is that. But the other one is, and I guess you witnessed it, the first day of the meet, it rained. The second day, it was 65 degrees. I forget what the third day was, but the fourth day was Thursday, Thanksgiving. It had gale force winds. I mean, really blowing hard. And then Friday, a front came in, and Friday, it was bitter cold. So when we went out in the morning, it was like 20 degrees and breezy flying that bird. And when she caught a rabbit, pretty much right away, I didn't have the heart to just say, "Oh, let's stay out and hunt some more rabbit." It just wasn't nice out. So I said, "Let's pack it up. Let's head back in." But you have to be ready for everything, and I mean that meaning clothes wise too. You bring your heavy coats and your light coats, and I've been away from it for so long, and I tell people this all the time, and it's part of my talk. I want to say is, NAFA has some wonderful resources, and I've dealt with all the people who I don't like, who were in upper positions, and people who are directors, and some really good guys, some really just below average people. And I'm not criticizing anyone in particular, but, I can look over all that because when I sit there and listen to the meetings, they're working on avian influenza vaccine. They're working on, deregulating the peregrine and making it as easy to get a peregrine as a red tail. They're constantly working on border crossings. They're constantly working on, different stuff. So, I mean, the membership's $45 or something. You spend that on a beer and wings on a night at a bar, and the stuff they achieve and the publications. And I'm delinquent in talking about this because I wanted to talk about it first thing. The publications are second to none, and that's because Dan Milner. He does all the NAFA publications. Dan did the page layout and design of my book, and my book's got unbelievable good reviews, not because of what I wrote or anything like that. It's because of the page layout design, the picture presentation. It's just spectacular. And, that's what you have as a resource as a NAFA member. You can call Dan up and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing it." Since I wrote this book, 3 people have contacted me and said, "I want to write a book on fly fishing. I want to write a book on this. How'd you do it?" And I refer them back to him. And something people don't realize too is, if you're a NAFA member and you run into trouble, like legal trouble, you can pick up the phone and you can call a lawyer, part of the general counsel, a lawyer who's a falconer, and you can tell them, "This is what happened to me. What do you think?" And you can get some advice. So NAFA's got a ton of resources, and everyone should consider joining, and they really should. And I've been, I guess, a member for almost 40 years, and I built the very first computer. that NAFA ever owned, and they were leasing one for like $1,000 a year. And I was in the computer business back then. I said, I can make 4 for that. So we made 386s with 20 meg hard drives. We spared no expense and put a 3.5-inch floppy drive and a 5-inch floppy drive in it. And what people don't know, not to bore anyone, but back then, you didn't store any data on your computer. They were all stored on these disks because there was just never no room. So that's why you needed all these floppy disks, And but I made them. I still have the computer at my home. I asked the archives if they wanted it, and they weren't the least bit interested. But I will still hang on to it for another 20 years. Maybe someone in the archives will want that. But just being involved in NAFA and going back to the meet and getting exposed to what a great organization it is, in their meets. It was pretty exciting to go out there after 20 years.
There's a lot of people that you may not think that you would find or have common ground with and stuff, but once you get a chance to really kind of sit and talk to them about certain things, it's pretty cool. And you find that you've got a lot more common ground with some people than you thought you might have. Mm-hmm. And you kind of touched on something earlier too that I think it's important for people to remember, in that you can have whatever personal beliefs that you have, or differences with people or whatever, and you're gonna have them. It's part of life. We're human beings,
right?
We're not going to like every single person that we meet, nor do we have to. But when it comes to having some degree of a overall representative body, and that does deal with a lot of different things, this is actually a subject that I talked to here shortly. By the time that people hear this, I'm sure it'll been probably long released, but the episode that I did with Martin recently, I didn't get to record it while I was there around him, but we talked about a lot of different things, and a lot of the cogs and the wheels that are turning behind the scenes and things like that, and I think it's very important that you can't really overemphasize to people how much stuff that people don't know about goes on. Mm-hmm. And, just because you may not know, or it seems like on the surface there may not be a whole lot being done in certain areas and stuff, doesn't necessarily mean that there's not. And, that's why, for me personally, just my personal decision, I still choose to, pay membership dues and things like that, because over the years I've come to appreciate and understand more all the different work, time, effort, and energy that goes into that whole thing too. Yeah. And, so, that being said, it's cool. Huge meets personally, because believe it or not, I'm kind of an introvert myself. I know if that might surprise some people,
I'm
but
pretty much too. I stick to myself. I don't want to hang, I want to hang out with a whole lot of people I don't know. And I was going to say one thing, Noah. I think the biggest mistake anyone can make going to a field meet, whether it's a local one or a NAFA meet especially, is not seeking out the guest speakers, not seeking out the other people who, have heard of, and talking to them and introducing yourself. And you're doing yourself a huge disservice if you don't walk up and introduce yourself. I saw Steve Martin walking around, who was the keynote speaker. The guy's probably the best bird trainer in the world. And, I struck up a conversation with him, and half an hour later we were still talking, so you go to that for the social aspect too, is half the meet, Mm-hmm. And, go see what other people are doing. But I like, I even say in my book, I've met Marley Nelson. I've met Jim Fowler from Mutual of Omaha, Tom Cade, all those guys. And I said, when was I going to run into them again? And the answer's never. So,
well, and once again, like I said, I consider myself an introvert. I wish that there's parts of me that wish that I could go every year, but I know it's just a simple fact of life that I'm not going to be able to.
Right, it's not cheap either.
Yeah,
right?
And it's not cheap, and there's time. A lot of times it's also on Thanksgiving week, which is a whole other set of.
That week is my anniversary, my birthday, and Thanksgiving, so it's one of the harder weeks to get away. But thank God my wife likes to travel and go to those events, so she comes with.
Yeah, so like I said, it is what it is. I know that I'm not always going to care to go or be able to go, just because of my life and my personality as well. I have to really kind of start to, and especially you can, I'm sure you understand this too, now that you have your book and you're being asked to be guest speakers.
Ambassador,
and,
yes.
Yeah, and now it's one of those things where you're starting to have to kind of, pick, choose, and start to delegate a little bit more, like, and prioritize, okay, well, what can I do? What's more realistic? What should I do this year versus next year? And because now I'm finding myself starting to get invited to more and more things and different stuff. And I'm just like, there's just no time, how
much bandwidth do you have?
Exactly. So anyway, but no, it's cool though. It's, that it was productive for you. It was a nice time. And yeah, I'm not disagreeing with anything that you said. And as far as, trying to encourage support for the organization and stuff. There's always going to be people that have differences here and there and stuff. It is what it is. But
we're falconers.
Exactly. And it is a common aspect of life in this sport.
Well, plus, how often do you go and I walk by a guy's truck, a real nice guy, Chase from Texas, and
Chase Ellis is a good dude.
Yeah, he's weighing his Golden Eagle, and I just walked up and I said, I gotta know, tell me. He's like, hang on. Oh, 7 pounds, 10 ounces. I'm like, oh my God, so, you don't see that at every place you go to. So that's an aspect too. You want to see really great looking birds and high performing birds in one spot. That's fun to go see that,
Sure. Well, and before we get too much further and before we kind of start to wrap up a little bit here, I always ask people for at least one good story and one good, at least, kind of experience with a bird, whatever, hunting story, whatever the case is. I already know the one that I want to ask you about, though, and
it's the one that everyone.
It's
everyone
the one.
Me.
Seriously though, how does a bird get sucked up into a combine or what was it again?
It's a soybean combine.
So go ahead and just tell it.
Sometimes when I'm talking, I try to get out of it because I feel like I try to tell the story only once every 10 years, and but it was the first flight out with a brand new red tail, and the bird was performing beautifully, and she was real big, and she's following for 45 minutes, and we came up to a clearing, and a local red tail pulled up across the field. And the next thing I see is my bird just beating feet across the field, knocks it out of a tree, and they're gone. They just took off, across the countryside. So I had a really good Louis Luxander LF3 transmitter on, so I knew no matter how far that bird was going, it was from my long wing days, I knew I could track that bird down. So just before sunset, I pull up, with the receiver blaring, and it's a huge soybean field, and there were 2 combines running, harvesting the field. I cut right through the middle of it on access road like I owned the place. I've ended up coming right up to the bird. She's sitting on the tree line about 15 feet off the ground. And she looked a little disheveled when I saw her, but I didn't, kind of quite know what was going on. So I immediately called her down because she was really well trained, and she just sat there. I put the lure down. She sat there. And so while I'm kind of fiddling around, the sun was almost getting ready to set. One of the combines pulls up, and this old farmer gets out, and immediately, when you think you're trespassing something, I was fast talking, I'm doing this, I'm waiting, get my bird leaving as soon as as soon as I called her down, and he walks up to me and just says, "Is that your bird?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "That bird chased a rabbit in front of my combine. I ran it over and it shot out the top." And I just remember screaming, "Holy, you know what?" And I don't know if this is a G-rated podcast, but
you can say what you. This is one of those stories that you can say what you need to say to emphasize your point.
Holy shit! Yeah. And the guy just gets back in his combine and leaves, and I'm just standing there. Oh my God, what just happened? And then the bird came down to the fist. I looked it over, made the once over, made sure everything was attached, and there was no signs of blood or trauma. And I put her back in the giant hood. And when I took her back, I put her in the garage that night, and I actually snapped a picture, which I don't even think the story would have probably ended up in the book if I didn't I must have my camera close by, and I snapped a picture of her sitting in the on the perch. So the left side of her body took the brunt of the hit, and so the combine had cut off all 5 of her major primaries. It cut her tail in half on the left side. It cut the B-wit and the bell right off the leg. which was a tragedy unto itself because it was the last complete pair of Peter Asborno bells I had in a smaller size. And I was like, I was heartbroken I lost that bell out in that soybean field. I actually thought about getting a metal detector and going and searching for it. Like, exactly where did you run my bird over? I was going to ask. And so nothing else happened to the bird. I thought maybe there was internal injuries. And the next morning when I went out to the mew, I thought, well, maybe the bird's just going to be laying there, and it didn't. Did nothing phase that bird. So I had to put out an all points bulletin because I didn't have enough feathers to imp back on. I had some stuff, but I didn't have nowhere near it. So someone had a complete set of flight feathers and tail feathers, and I imped it back on, and I got the bird flying. And actually, Bon was out with me. It was at a New Jersey meet the first time out, and she pulled a squirrel off the top of a huge oak tree in spectacular fashion. And then I say the rest of the season went without incident, but an attribute of that bird, which I really didn't like, it continued chasing any red tail it saw away. So finally, after like the third time, I just refused to track it down anymore. So I would always have to wait, but she'd always fly, come back, 20 minutes later, she'd come back into the field. But that was a really interesting bird. And don't ask me how it survived, how it made it. But, it is what it is.
Well, and this is like the perfect time to emphasize the point that I was just making at the very beginning of this episode, and that not very many people that would fly 20 red tails, right, or not. I mean, there's going to be something happen,
right? And there's has to be a degree of luck in your life too, right?
And you obviously have a lot of it,
yeah,
man.
And I look at it that way. It's a lot of luck. You can be as cautious as you can, really. But there's got to be a little luck involved. I've had birds just for some reason cross a road and just get on the other side, and here comes a semi just blasting down, like you're thinking, there's stuff you don't even keeps you up at night. But there's a little bit of luck involved in everything, in catching game and everything else in this sport,
For sure. Well, I mean, what's next for you then? Are you going to just continue to keep flying red tails?
Yeah, I would say so. Eventually I'm going to move out of New Jersey. My wife's getting ready to retire, and we have a place in Florida, but nothing against people in Florida or anything, but I can't imagine being a falconer in Florida, although there's certainly a lot of Cooper's hawks down there and stuff like that. And they still have some Bob White quail down there. And I know people fly a lot of Merlins down there. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think I'd ever go back to a full long wing, flyer. But that's a good question. My next bird, I babysat an awful lot of Merlins, and for friends over vacations, and I've flown them in my yard, and so I know how to, I got a feel for handling them and stuff like that. That would be a really interesting bird to fly, because in New Jersey we have Cape May, New Jersey, and we have access to, there's limited trapping down there, but they'll see 550 Merlins in a day down there in Cape May. So we do have access to those. I love my goshawk. If my goshawk, didn't get Asper in its 9th summer, I'd still be flying that bird, and my book would be called "My Journey with One Goshawk." But I honestly don't know. I think I want to fly a few more red tails until we figure out where we're going to move to. And another thing too is a reason why I let them go, because I love trapping, and we do some banding. And we trap. We have a ridge spot, and that's a really exciting thing for me. I love raptor trapping, and so that's half the fun, And that starts your season out. It's really gets your juices flowing when you're out there trapping, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna. So then this bird, gonna get this one and start all over again. So I really love that aspect of the sport. So it's hunting, but trapping's another thing, and you see tons of crazy stuff where we trap. It's a huge bald eagle area. So if nothing's coming in or nothing's happening, you usually have a few eagles in the sky fighting life and death battles in the air, in front of you. So it's a lot of fun stuff to watch,
Yeah. And my parents, they retired several years ago, and they live in the villages down in Florida. So yeah, I knew I probably wouldn't even have to prompt you for the laugh on that, but I tease them all the time about it. But yeah, from what I've heard, it's an interesting state to, with all the development and everything. There's some guys that I've talked to that said that the hawking used to be really amazing at one time, especially for rabbits and, like you said, quail and stuff. But one guy I was talking to, it'll be an episode eventually, but he was just like, yeah, we had a great hawking down there, and then your parents moved in down there. So apparently like a lot of that area that they've developed down there around the villages and stuff used to be prime, for rabbit and a lot of other stuff.
I saw that firsthand a couple of years ago, because our place is in St. Augustine, which is northern Florida. But so I asked my wife, we used to birdwatch down there, and I traveled all over the country in high school and just out of high school. I mean, that's all we did was birdwatch. We'd do Rio Grande Valley, up into by the Arctic Circle of Canada and all over. So Key West and all that stuff. So I asked a few years ago, I said, hey, can I just leave vacation here with you guys, take our rental car, and go down and hit the spots in southern Florida, like Loxahatchee Wildlife Refuge, where the snail kites are, probably the rarest bird of prey in North America. And I wanted to go to the Everglades. I wanted to go to Corkscrew Swamp, all those places I've been to, haven't been to since like 1979. And she let me go down there, and I just had a wonderful time doing it. But I saw these huge, they look like senior citizen prisons down there, and they're in the middle of anywhere, and they got walls around them. They're very nice, and they got, the houses are beautiful, but they cropped up all over those wildlife refuges down in southern Florida. So I saw firsthand that there's just a ton of retirement stuff there, and a lot of them aren't near the beach or anything. They're quite far away. But I told my wife, I said, yeah, I saw these prison compounds for senior citizens. They're all gated and guarded and all that stuff.
Well, the only thing I will say to that, though, is to be a prisoner, you kind of have to be there unwillingly.
Yeah, right.
The thing about those communities, though, is that's the way they build them, and the people that live there love the fact that they don't ever have to leave or go anywhere else for anything ever. And everything can be reached with a golf cart and stuff,
and it's maintenance-free living for them, which I understand too. Eventually I'm not going to. Eventually I'm not going to want to mow a lawn. Someday.
Yeah, but. Yeah, we could probably sit here and crack on retirement communities and stuff for the rest of the day. Man, it still boggles my mind to this day how those places are structured. I'll never forget the first couple of times I went down to visit them, and I was just like, this is just. For me, it's bizarre. If you like it, hey, all the power to you. If it makes you happy, great. Different strokes, different folks, whatever. But yeah, as far as the hawking goes, though, my recommendation for you, because I've been looking for a personal hero, is I want you to go down there, still keep your red tails, and just hunt the piss out of iguanas. Yeah, just hawk the crap out of iguanas. Find wherever those are, move down to that part of Florida where there's a whole crap ton of iguanas, and just hunt the crap out of them with your red tails. I will come down and visit you.
And then I can round up pythons at night too down there. What is frightening in Florida is how many snakes are down there, and I've run into a few, and they're frightening. The poisonous snakes. So I'm not used to hunting that. New Jersey, you don't run into too many.
Well, I wouldn't even be afraid of the whole venomous snake aspect of things as much as just all the extra Burmese pythons and stuff that have proliferated down there. And the constrictors would be more what I was scared of.
Yeah. As a bird watcher too, there's parrots on the wires out, on the main drag, but on my beach resort, and and then I go down. There's minor birds, and there's just it's kind of like bird watching in Hawaii. When you go to Hawaii, there's no native birds in Hawaii. Everything's been introduced. The seabirds you see are birds that have been there over years and years and years. But all the endemic birds in Hawaii have died off from mosquitoes. So you see a lot of different birds, very exotic birds, but none of them are endemic to the state. And so Florida's kind of turning into that. It's a warm spot. Everybody, any bird that gets let loose that kind of likes living, they like retiring down there too.
Yeah.
And but we like the seasons too. We do skiing and all that. So we like So I can't honestly say where we'll settle, but and it won't be out west. But I do like going to try to catch a jackrabbit, which is really exciting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so I don't know, but that's all part of life. We'll see where we end up and all that stuff. But my caveat, as we talked about retirement communities, can my first question: can we put a mew in the backyard? No. Okay. Well, I'm not moving there.
There you go. Yeah, and then you're not going to be able to fit one in a lot of those places. You're going to be keeping it inside with your in the sun room or whatever that's built out back. Yeah. Right. But no. Well, I mean, I wish you the best in figuring all that out. I'm sure some circumstance will come along and figure it out for you at some point. But
we're never, in my mind, I never want to be without a bird.
Sure.
And we actually adopted my son 20 some years ago, and we went to Russia and Azerbaijan. And we came back that year. My wife's like, "This would be a good year for you not to have a bird." I said, "Yeah, maybe so." And then they were like, "No, I had to get a bird." So I've been uninterrupted. But there's always excuses. And well, before we go, we got to give a shout out to the New Jersey Falconry Club, because we are remotely coming from the field meet here in South Jersey, and we have built this meet up. And I'm proud to say I helped establish this meet at the same place. We have it in the same place every year, Swedesboro. It's legendary now on the East Coast, and we went over to the numbers last night, and we're going to have about 150 people at the banquet. I mean, absolutely unheard of.
Nice.
We've grown this thing up to such a big meet, and people just love coming here, and people are catching rabbits like crazy. It's and I tell people all the time, in the Carolinas and up in New York and Massachusetts, where they only have squirrels, I said, come down here, and people enjoy it, and they're moving a lot of stuff down here, and it's really a great place. The hotel is a huge, just gathering place that the atrium
nice
and
place,
the lobby, and everyone, it gives people a place to just hang out. I mean, literally there was a funeral yesterday, and I was mentioning I'm glad, that no one brought their dogs in and their birds in, because all the people were eating their funeral meal. And a girl came up to us and said, what do you guys do? What are you doing here? And we're told them. I said, well, who passed away? And she goes, oh, my aunt, an old, she lived a long, healthy life, and she passed away. So all of a sudden, some guy walks in with a hawk. Oh, no, he didn't walk in with a hawk. And she came back later and said, is there hawks here? I said, yeah. She goes, my nephew would like to see a hawk. I said, well, let me see if someone can bring a hawk in. It just so happened, the guy was like, I'm going to bring my Harris hawk in. Well, wouldn't you know, there was like 70 people from this funeral all circling this thing. It was the highlight of their day. They were all taking pictures, and they really enjoyed it. So it's so unique, to be able to share stuff like that. Like, these people were coming in to get their funeral meal and remembrance of the person who passed away, and someone brings a hawk out, and everyone was laughing and taking pictures. It was really exciting. So but yeah, this is a wonderful place. I urge anyone who want to come down to Cottontail Central, to come here, every year, and the raffle is spectacular. And, everything about it is great. And people who run it are very friendly. And so I like taking a poll, because I take interest in it. Where are you from? You're from the Midwest. There's some Rhode Island people. There's lots of New York people. There's lots of PA people. We have Aaron from North Carolina is here. And so I like pointing out all the people who came, people from Maryland, and it's a huge social event, and the dogs are running amok, it's always fun. You go anywhere where there's a lot of dogs, right?
Oh yeah, well, and that's the whole reason why I came down. Still, I told all these mutual friends of ours that I wanted to come down so that they could see my, I've talked about my dachshunds with them, and Casey and all of them had me down last summer to do a series for dachshunds and stuff, and which is still continually ongoing because I have so many Dachshund episodes, but
you can't have enough.
Yeah. Well, and so I mean, I was actually, because of work, work took me out to Wyoming, so I actually flew from Wyoming to home earlier this week. A couple days ago or whatever. Got home, maybe had about 3 hours of sleep, then got my dogs at home, which is southern Indiana, and then drove 13 hours here, with the dogs, and then got a chance to run them right before dark last night, and then most of this morning, and I wanted to be able to still keep at least one set of plans that I had because work screwed everything up.
Right.
But I mean, that's a big reason why I wanted to at least make this meet and maybe kind of make it a meet that I continue to try and come to because, I've kind of got my extended Dachshund family here,
right.
So, and
do you breed them?
I don't breed them,
okay.
no, and nor do I think I will ever breed any myself, at least not for a very, very long time. And plus, I have all males, so
okay.
I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, that's going to be hard to breed.
yeah.
They can help out. Somewhere.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I'm more than happy to kind of loan one to somebody if they want to make some more. But
I actually have a top secret thing because I'm sure this will be released after tomorrow night, or excuse me, after tonight. But I'm real excited. We have 2 Dachshunds, and when I was writing the book, and then we lost our younger one, she was always kind of sickly. And so my wife's been hinting around, she wants another long-haired Dachshund. And I've been she thinks I'm totally opposed to it, but what I'm doing is behind the scenes working to get her a puppy. And so that's how I got Teddy gave me a recommendation for Aaron Kincaid down in North Carolina. I asked him if he's breeding dogs, and he said yes. And then he called me a week or 2 later and asked me if I wanted to come down and be the guest speaker. And so I got to see his dogs run, which worked phenomenally. And he had his litter just a few days earlier. So when I saw him yesterday, I said, I hope you bought a picture of the puppy. And he had one sitting. It's still the size of a hamster. But so I told him, I said, we're going to, at the banquet, we're going to get my wife and I'm going to introduce you, as I just met you, down in North Carolina. And then we're going to say, that's your puppy, the picture. And she's going to freak out because she really misses that dog. And my other dog's 14 years old and she's just bored now.
Yeah.
She's bored around the house. I can tell she just sleep in and, she likes guarding the house, but, I think she's really going to embrace having a puppy, and I'm pretty sure she will.
It can make them young again.
Yeah, yeah, it will, and that's what it is. And I can just tell she's bored, and she's still really healthy. So that's all hitting the fan tonight. So I'm really scoring some husband points. And if you want to know some more husband points, if you ever write a book, this is to everyone who's listening. You better dedicate it to your wife, or you're getting thrown out of the house. So that's my only marriage advice I have for anyone here.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, that's great though, and yeah, I mean they're Dachshunds. Once that is one thing that I'm glad that my wife. She could care less for the most part about my birds or falconry in general and stuff. But one thing that I'm happy that she has kind of taken a mutual interest in, though, is the fact that she's come to really love Dachshunds and stuff.
Yeah, of course, the cutest dog in the world.
And so now we have, like 1 became 2, became 3.
Yeah,
and,
you can't have just one, right?
She was the one that talked me into the last one that I just got, and I just looked at it. Whenever I was holding him, I was just like, I'm screwed, whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, we actually got out, me and Aaron and Harrison, we all got out this morning. Aaron got a chance to see my dogs run this morning and said they did really well. And we're kind of maybe discussing some things too, possibly. So we'll see what happens. But I one of my goals is to eventually offer up one of my dogs to sire a litter. I think it'd be really cool and kind of an honor, but we'll see what happens. I like the breed a lot. I've come to really love it. And, but as far as that goes, I'm assuming then that they were kind of somewhat of a, staple for a while for you, with your like how often have you run dogs, in falconry? Just
I can count on one hand, never.
Yeah.
I don't hunt with dogs.
You don't?
And it started out when we got our first dog. My goshawk was an imprinted bird, and my goshawk wanted to eat it. And so, but and people all have different opinions, and I understand it. Seeing a pair, a dog work with a bird is spectacular. And, the guys tell me the story, I'm still putting my hunting boots on and they caught a rabbit already, but for me, falconry is catharsis or whatever that word is, where I go out. I go out and I want peace and quiet. I want me and my bird and just moving through the woods. And I can barely keep track of my beating stick. So I think a dog would add a layer of complexity that I'm not looking forward to. But I love watching them. And I actually heard yesterday, by the end of the day, they had 8 to 10 dogs out in the field running at the same time. I rabbits don't have a chance, but it was just so cool. But also, I won't even point that out. But my wife is basically, these are my dogs, and they're not yours to lose, because every now and then she'll hear a story, and that's fine with me. And I just like the peace and quiet of being in the field, and I like hunting by myself a lot too. Of course, I want to show people how good my bird is and see how it is. But I mean, it's just the solitude and the quiet. I'm out there for hours at a time. I just find it very relaxing.
All I'm hearing are reasons why you should be hunting with a dog, man.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I had a series of pictures that didn't make it into the book, but when I get back in the car, I came in from a convenience store, the Wawa stores here, getting something, and everyone in the store, a couple of years ago, they were looking at me in horror, and I'm like, what are these people doing? I get out, look in the rearview mirror, blood is coming out of my ear and all the way down the side of my head, from briars. And so what I do is I sometimes when I know I got cut, I'll take a picture and just to see how bad it is, take a selfie and see where the blood's flying off my head. And I literally have about 12 of those pictures, and I was going to put them in the book. But Dan, my publisher, he didn't like that angle on it. But yeah, I like beating through the bush, and I'm still really super healthy. I'm not that old. And, it's part of my workout routine, be honest with you, because summer we golf all long. We golf all summer long, and I stay in pretty good shape. But I look at my iPhone and see, I did 4 miles, and then I know that isn't 4 easy miles. That's 4 miles over briars and thick, patches stuff. So I still enjoy it. I'll tell you right now, though, when I'm turn 80 years old, I'm going to get a Tiercel Harris Hawk and a Dachshund. I'll still catch more rabbits than anyone else out there, right? So that's what I see in the future. But for now, I just, I like peace and quiet in the field.
Well, you know what, though? I mean, just to be 100% honest with you, I used to think that I would never hunt with dogs either. And then, I started off with Vizslas and then quickly discovered for my area, really not the best choice. I love the breed also, but just not the best choice for where I'm at. And then I finally bit the bullet, almost 3 years ago now, and got, Hades, my first dachshund. And
Hades.
yeah. Hades, Horus, and Baal. Those
the
are
Greeks.
My And then so basically, I used to think that it would be too much chaos for me too. And, 2's a good number. I mean, now that I've added a third, I'm kind of still on the fence on, whatever. Once he matures a little bit more, maybe, because he's still a pup. But, I'll get back with you on that. But
where he fits into the puzzle.
But I will say that I have my falconry and everything. I have way more enjoyment now than I have ever experienced. Just it's an extra added dimension of just overall fun and feeling of accomplishment, at least for me. And I think most people, would agree in that, and it's not necessarily just about the dog and the bird, but just seeing how much more fun and enriched that animal that you have is because of that activity that it's sharing with you. For me, I think is a really huge deal.
Yeah, it's a huge bonding thing. Well, I just know for a fact that when I go out and watch guys work their dogs, I pay more attention to the dogs than the bird, and I just I really admire the way they go, the way they move, and
You
the
have
dachshund,
to. You have to.
and well trained dachshunds, and these guys all on this East Coast here, all have really well trained dachshunds, and Teddy, that comes all from Teddy's tutelage originally, and I watch the dog. Where's the bird? I don't know. I'm watching the dogs. That's the half the fun, and plus they're so full of energy. You never see one in low energy mode out in a hunting field. So I admire that, and but they're Grace House pets too, and people don't want to hear that, but they are. They guard your house. They their personalities are so interesting.
Yeah, like, except for the whole impossibility of potty training thing.
Right. Well, especially if it's raining outside for 3 days in a row, your dog walks to the sliding glass door and he's like, no,
Yeah.
I'll just go pee in the house somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, and then if there's snow on the ground, well, there's going to be turds in there somewhere too.
My one dog that we lost loved the snow, and I really didn't miss her until we had the first light snow, and she used to go out there and run around in circles, and that's when it kind of hits home. You kind of realize when you lost something when you see something like that, and she loved the snow and run around, didn't care, and they're full of energy. They're really great dogs, and but like I said, in my book I said you can't come to a falconry meet here without being trampled by a herd of them. We had some people leaving their cars, but we had a lot last night, and the people in the hotel and the visitors, they all love them. They absolutely do. So they're great, and maybe someone will train cats to help us out in the falconry world, and then they'll be legends in the sport. So we got something to shoot for.
Well, yeah. Well, I won't make the joke that just popped into my head about the whole cat thing. But anyway, the challenge has been issued. Whether or not you choose to accept it or not, eventually in your life, it's up to you.
Yeah,
but,
eventually I will. And who knows? Maybe this dog. This dog I do want to run it. Whether it's in the falconry aspect or not, because just lately we've been taking our dogs and we take them for the normal walk through the woods, and we've been taking the leash off of them, and they're older now where they stick together. 1 year old, 2 year old, they're dachshunds. They're sniffing out everything anywhere. So, but yeah, I think it's gonna be a lot of fun to run the dog out, and I think this one I'll get out more because now I'm seeing, we are capable. Me and my wife are capable of training one possibly, and so it'll be fun. And then just the energy is like having a baby too. Energy and they give in the house is really wonderful.
I'm telling you, the second that you start, really running, that starts figuring things out, and you see those bunnies that start kicking up because that thing's running, you're going to wish that there was a bird above it.
Well, I surely have the opportunity to take it out with other people and their dogs, and 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 these guys all know, the older dogs teach the younger ones in the field,
sure,
and they follow each other. So I'll make a point of if people are running dogs, to bring her out and get her out there, and so it's always a possibility. But they're really unique dogs, and and they're really incredibly cute. So there's not a whole lot of negatives about it. And there's something to be said of having a little tiny dog. You want to scoop it up and get running out of somewhere at a house or wherever you are. Scooping up a little dachshund and moving away is an attribute too. That's good.
Yep. It's a lot easier to transport.
You're not grabbing a golden retriever and picking it up and running out of the yard or something.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I think you'll get there eventually. But I'm glad that like I said, you need to at least run it, and I think you'll see the extra fun in it for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. Yeah. And then just a real quick circle back to the book. I'm getting wonderful reviews, and the funny thing is when you buy one of my books online, you get a little email that says review this book. So the first few waves of them went out before Christmas, and my wife is on the computer and she goes, "You got your first review?" And I said, "Really?" And she's going, "Yeah." My son came out and he's like, "Let's read the review." So it was like so funny. I grabbed the laptop, I opened it up, and they're sitting on the couch just waiting to hear this great review. Now I will say, caveat this whole story by when you go to my website, the first thing you will read is the book is an 11 by 11 coffee table format book, 200 pages, 250, beautiful pictures. The review is a 2-star out of 5. And the person states, this book is an unusual size. I don't like it. It doesn't fit in my bookcase, and I have nowhere to put it. I don't like this book at all. And I'm going to be giving it away at my next falconry meet I go to because I just have nowhere to keep this book. So that was my very first review. Now, would that keep me? I was ready to throw all the books away and never write another book again. And my son was hilarious. He's like, Dad, post that online because I can make an option to post it online or not. I was like, no, I'm going to save this guy, the brutality of people. He goes, I want to tell him to go buy a bigger bird book. And then he should have bought the pocket size version, the little teeny 3-inch size version. Like he had everything figured out, but it was funny. And then every other review after that, has literally been really wonderful and all 5-star reviews. People love it, and they're from different walks of earth, meaning some of the bird, I could tell who were the bird watchers who bought it. And the falconers and the people beginning and also that was all really good stuff. And but yeah, that first review was just absolutely hilarious. And I don't know why anyone had spent time writing it, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, I find the humor in those things. Just like anytime I've ever put like a music video or anything up on YouTube, reading the comments to me. I mean, people say that you should shy away from it. I agree to a large extent, but the morbid curiosity in me always wins out, and I just have the best time reading some of the most horrendous comments that you can. I mean, just shredding your soul, basically. I think it's hilarious. I find the humor in it.
I find the most powerful thing you can do online is not respond, which is funny because it drives people crazy. And I posted a little tiny 20-second video of the bird I'm flying this season, and it's sitting on a little PVC perch, which is just a flying perch. It has no wrap on it, no nothing. Now, that bird sat on that perch for probably 2 minutes a day for the first week I had it, just jumping to me in the garage. Oh my God, I didn't have wrap on that perch. 3 different people are, but they just don't, they're assuming and don't understand what it is. And one guy I replied back to, and he was barking back at me. And I thought, you know what, this is stupid. I don't enjoy getting involved in that. But that was pretty funny, a little 20-second video, and people are criticizing me. So you need a thick skin. Coming into any of this stuff, if you're going to put it on social media or you're going to, even writing the book, the book has nothing controversial in it. It's tried and true training methods that, thousands of people have done before me. I'm just kind of regurgitating what I was taught and whatever other people, use. So, I tried not to worry about that. The older you get, you got less, interest in dealing with any of that stuff. But
sure.
Some of the negative stuff's kind of funny because you just, where it's coming from and you got to laugh at it. Either you're laughing or you're crying and you better be laughing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you can overanalyze and everything else. It's really pointless at the end of the day. It's just, you have to, anytime you put yourself out at all, especially artistic standpoint, anything, you better be prepared to receive some of it because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's no getting around it. And it just, I mean, you got to find, just some degree of joy in it. And that, someone spent the time to tell you how much you suck. So at least, you made an impact somehow, It's just like, I always just love leaving the comments back. I mean, whenever I would, it's just like, appreciate your input, man.
That's the worst you can do to an internet falconry expert is either give them nothing or thank them for the timely advice.
It's trolling back. I like to troll back.
But I was surprised at how many people just went out on Facebook and stuff and messaged me and told me how much they liked the book. I thought that was really cool. And some people, kept replying back. And I have time. I'm retired. Who has more time than me? So I'll reply back to everybody. And, they all told me how they liked the book and what they like about it. And people are asking me questions. And, maybe if that's kind of a role, I need to take, that's fine. So, and I answer the questions and I respond to everybody. And, I will tell one last funny story that a guy ordered the book in Canada and I printed the label out for DHL and 2 weeks later it never arrived to him because I could see it on my website and I emailed the guy and I go, hey, did you get your book back yet? Book yet? And he says, no. He goes, I want to track it. I said, I'll help you track it. Let me find out what's going on with this thing. So I track it. And the next day he goes, oh, I found it. DHL told me it's at their location for me to pick up. And it didn't come in any further. He goes, problem is that's 100 miles from my house. And I'm like, what? I apologized to him profusely. And I was so upset. And he replied back the next day, oh, I got another employee on the phone. And they said, why don't we send that book to your DHL location in your town? Right, which you would have thought they would have done. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of a funny thing. So I've been talking to a lot of people. People have been giving me, a lot of feedback, all good, so I'll accept all the good feedback. And it's been fun, and people are showing up to meet here who I haven't met, but I've talked to, and, they come up and introduce themselves, or I'll see who they are and introduce them. So it's a lot of fun. It takes you kind of out of your comfort zone and your quiet,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that too. I mean, for me, it's always weird. Like I've always had problems throughout the life, like accepting compliments. It's like, how dare you compliment me?
I have no problem with being complimented.
I don't either. It's just I still to this day struggle sometimes though with I can't believe someone actually likes something that I would be doing, It's kind of that whole, thing or whatever.
Well, trust me, music is more subjective than falconry can ever be.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
so,
for sure.
So in the music side of it, it's just, way different than that. But I mean, it's fun and it's I'm meeting new people, right? Which I'm not. Up till now, I haven't been all that interested in, I want to hang out with my buddies. I want to go out hawking with them and bust on each other and have a good time with my friends, kind of like how I like golfing,
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't try not to take it too seriously. So I enjoy all that. And then, and another thing too, it's a lot of these falconers, these young falconers, they are really exceptionally good hawkers and game hawkers. And that's what I like, because game hawking's the thing, You can fly the fanciest birds you ever wanted to afford or any of that stuff, but the people who are bringing stuff to bag and all the people, and the red-tailed hawk is the bird that introduces everybody to that, and they catch a boatload of game, So I see a lot of young people flying these birds, and they're really exceptional falconers. And you can know that they've only been doing it for a year or two, and their birds are really well trained. And I like seeing that aspect of the sport too. Fancy birds, flying, high and all is cool. But when you see a young person and they're catching some of their first heads of game, that's really cool to me, I think.
For sure. No, I agree 100%. Well, before we get out of here, what's your website again where people can pick this up if they want?
You can just Google a journeywithredtail.com, and there's no hyphens, and I will point out that people pointed out that the bird is actually formerly named the red-tailed hawk, and some people were appalled that I was shortening it up to red-tail, but I'm blaming it on every other falconer who came before me. I'm like, yeah, falconers shorten it up, so I'm going with it. So throughout the book, I refer to it as a red-tail, but some people wanted to point out the official name as if I didn't know what it is. But yeah, there's a website set up, and I will say that go to your favorite supply house, and most of them are carrying it, and you buy in your jesses and your bells and your hoods, throw a copy in your bin there, and all of them are signed, and even the supply houses that bought a large quantity of them, I sat up and watched hockey games and signed 200 and some books that got shipped out. So everyone gets a signed book, and it's fun. I don't want to say I'm giving back to the community because I want people to buy my book, and I hope I break even someday.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it, and it's probably the one and only book I ever read. So of course I'm going to sign them and thank the people each person who bought it. So it's pretty cool, and it's been well received. So if it was just mediocre, I think we'd be talking more about guitars this conversation than anything. But it's been real well received, and everyone who sees it, enjoys it. So that makes me happy. And Dan Milner, who did the page layout and design, we talk all the time, and I turn that feedback back onto him because it's kind of he's responsible for a lot of that. So I always let him know. So I'll talk to him tomorrow morning after the meet, tell him how it was received, how the talk went, and all that stuff. So it's been fun, and
Yeah.
and I got more guest speaking things. Next year I've been asked to do a bunch of stuff, which is fun. So I got time to prepare for that and go meet other people. And that's one reason I never became a NAFA director, because I wouldn't want to do it unless I could go to all the picnics. I could go to all the meets. I feel like a NAFA director should have the free time to do that. So maybe in the future, I'll have a schedule that that lets me go do more travel. And my wife loves to travel too, so it isn't like something she would be opposed to. So I'm enjoying it for what it is, and it's going to die down eventually. My 15 minutes is fleeting awful quickly, but for what it's worth, I've been enjoying it so far.
Well, fantastic. Well, and I've really enjoyed this conversation as well. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been good getting to know you a little bit. And we have to, of course, we were nice and didn't do it, while recording, but it's nice to rag on Bon a little bit too,
It's good. He's a person who doesn't accept praise easily also. So he's horribly embarrassed. So at least we know we did that to him.
Yep.
And I would go online and check out those snipe meet guys and those snipe flyers, because that is one of the most interesting forms of falconry I've ever seen.
It's on my agenda for next year.
And he is knee deep in it, and he just came back from Arkansas. And the pictures were really cool. Someone took some really good pictures.
Yeah.
And that snipe hunting is just, and I go down there and watch him do it. And it's just really intriguing. So that is, you want to see the most finite, focused form of falconry there is. I think that's probably it,
Yeah. Well, and I got a chance to see it for the first time while I was in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And good stuff. Yeah, I think it's my favorite form of hunting with long wings, particularly, like Tiercel peregrines and stuff. I think it's personally, I find it way more fun to watch than even like duck hawking or even, the bigger, upland game, birds and stuff. I just think it's just way cooler.
I love to go back and ask him, let me see the GPS, because I want to see how fast that bird came down, because I knew it was over 100 miles an hour. And I just love seeing that stuff, because it's 180 degrees from what I do. I have a bird in a tree, falling out of a tree, catching rabbits, and then you got this other aspect of the sport like that, and it's really intriguing. It just kind of adds up to how great the sport is,
For sure.
There's so many moving parts, and so many different things to do, and people, and there's a lot of things that people latch onto and say, this is what I want to do, and I enjoy that part of it too. People can pick out the bird, the prey they want. They really, there's a lot of stuff to do in the sport, and there's a lot of stuff to achieve to yourself. Can I train I trained one bird, can I train a different type of bird? And that's a challenge, every falconer should think about,
It's all good. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up then.
Yeah.
And like I said, thanks again so much. I'm glad that, like I said, you've been having a lot of good positive feedback and reception with everything. And, hopefully we'll get a chance to hang out and do some hawking in person sometime.
Yeah, John, I really appreciate it. I will say this is my first endeavor into the radio business, if this is actually called radio. But I really appreciate it, and spread the word. And, everyone, good luck hawking, Good luck.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everybody appreciates it. And man, we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yep.